Hey, this is DNN Dave, and I'm here again with my friend Don Gingold. Don, hey again.
Hey, how are you, Dave? I'm doing great.
Good.
I'm so psyched for starting this project.
Absolutely,
I'm
man.
all ready to go. I've got my DNN mug, I've got my DNN shirt, I got my DNN poster. I'm all DNN. We're going to do this.
That's great, man. Well, I mean, let's jump right into it. So, last segment, you laid out kind of the use case, the business case, what project you're really trying to accomplish here, and goals that you have. And this segment, we're going to jump into starting to build the solution. And let me switch over views here real quick, and then we'll get our ugly mugs a bit out of the way. And you've got a list of glossary terms, and there's some relational information. So I think we need an entity of a book, and this will make more sense when we get in there. But I'm kind of using this as a bit of a reference for me. So I think what I'm going to do here is I'm going to log in to your site,
Hmm.
and as a super user here, so we'll have access to all the control that we need. Thank you for
Right.
setting that up. And now
Sure.
we are in. And what we want to do is, I think what I'm going to do is just build this right here on this page, so that this will be kind of in view here as we're working on it. Pun intended, view, in view.
I like it.
All right, yeah. So there are some semantics that we use in Too Sexy, and as we go through this, we'll get used to these terms. But at a high level, it's going to be, you've got content types, and that's kind of what you would think of as a entity in a database. So like a glossary would be would have a content type of a glossary. Okay, and then that content type is going to have fields associated with it. So content type equals entity, in the database world. So we'll need to get familiar with that term. I'll say it a lot. And that's what we're going to focus on today, is really getting the data structure in place. So content item and fields for those content items. And those also define the data type, if you will. So if it's a string or if it's something like that. So we'll see that when we get in there. When we
Okay, that makes sense.
when we go to start building out and visualizing that data, we'll talk about the view or the template. And a lot of people use those interchangeably, but you'll see once we get in the interface here, there is a little bit of a difference between those two things, but they're associated with each other.
Sure.
And yeah, and we'll talk about lists, and we'll talk about details. And that's your typical list and detail kind of views or whatever. But let's go ahead and let's go into edit mode here in DNN. We're going to add a module to the page. And when you installed Too Sexy, now I think this is the latest as of the date of this recording. This is Too Sexy 11.0.1 or 11.1, I think. Yeah, 11.1.0. So when you install Too Sexy, you'll notice that two modules actually get installed associated with Too Sexy, and these are the two. It's app and content. Real quickly, I'll explain the difference between these two. If you're just getting started out with Too Sexy, and you're not doing too incredibly complicated stuff, then content's probably where you want to go, because it's more simple kind of way to get around and all that. But in the end, content is really just a type of app that is simplified. They did this to help you get started, with simple content type things. But as you advance into Too Sexy, you're going to want to shift over to doing an app for every application that you're building. So in this case, we're building
Okay.
a glossary kind of app. So I want to start with app because I don't want to find out later that I'm pinned into a corner. Also, if you add multiple solutions within content, which you can absolutely do, all that data gets stored in the same bucket, you know. So it becomes a little cluttered the more views and more data that you add to content. So it's nice from an isolation standpoint to use app. That way you can have its own content types, fields and stuff that are associated only with the functionality of that app.
Okay.
So, yeah, there's a lot more to that, but that's kind of the thing. Content is really just a type of app, but you're going to want to build an app for every application that you're trying to build. All right. So let's add app to the page here. And we'll put it up at the top. That way we can kind of scroll down to see what we're doing. Now, when you first add this to the page, you'll typically see this type of thing. A lot of this translates to content as well. It works the same way. It's going to want to know what app we're adding to the page. We added an app module to the page, but it doesn't know the first thing about what kind of app we want. So you could go and you could install an app from the many free apps that you can get from the Too Sexy folks that have put them out there, or you can build your own. In our case, we're going to build our own. So all we're doing is putting this on the page here so that we can have access to apps management, because we want to create our own app. So we're going to go in here first. And at this point, really, I can get out of the edit view in DNN. We don't need to be in edit view, but notice when we went in here, maybe one of the dots just connected for you. What do you see in the list here of apps? Content.
Content.
Why? Because it is an app. So, you can access content app from here as well. But we're going to create our new one. So I'm going to come down here to the bottom, and I'm going to click plus to add a new app. Now this is a new interface, so bear with me if I get something wrong here, but they've made this quite a bit better, in my opinion. Used to, it was a little more convoluted. So this is great. I'm going to click plus, and I think this is going to create an app. So I'll click this plus sign, and we're going to give the app a name here. So in this case, we'll call this Glossary, because this this is the case of the missing glossary, right? So
we found it.
Yeah. So I think we found the first part of the glossary, but we gotta find the rest of it. I mean, it's still a bit of a mystery to us, right? Well, that wasn't hard, right? That was pretty easy. So we have now created an app, but this app is empty. It doesn't have anything in it. It's just an empty app. So now that we have the app, we can actually access the app. Now, there's different things that you can do, and one of the things in the new Too Sexy is that they really reads quite different. So it's kind of cool to see this. You could delete the app from here if you don't want it anymore, don't need it. You can never delete content though. The content app. That one's baked in. That would destroy their module called content. So can't do that. Yeah. And if you need to empty the cache for an app, it's just not behaving properly, it's cluttered up, you can empty that. Let's see. So let's go into the app. We do that by clicking the name, I believe, here. And now we've got our interface here for the Glossary app. Okay, and there's some nice little getting started stuff here that you could look at. Might get a little confused, but I mean, this can help you along. Let's go right in the data, because that's where we want to build our solution here. We want to build it from the ground up, and we need to start with the data first so that we can visualize that data later on.
Yes.
And Don, ask me questions as we go through here if you're thinking of anything as we go along. If something's confusing the way I show it, or if I go too fast, let me know.
No problem. So far, so good.
All right, so we can ignore all these other things here because these are some fancy stuff. We're now going to just focus on data. So you'll see here that we've got what's going to eventually be a table here full of content types and fields for those content types, and we might have some descriptions and names for those. So I'm assuming we can click this plus down here to add a new content type. So, we've got a drop down here. All right, so we can go ahead and put a description in here of that content type if we want to. There's the name. Okay, I see they're using material design here now. So that field just about escaped me. I didn't see that it was up there. So let's give it a name. We want to call this, how about we call this content type terms, because we're going to do the name of the app is Glossary, so we want to create a content type of terms, right? Does that work for you on that, or would you call that phrases, or would you call that, what would you call that?
No, if I understand correctly, is this in the list, you've got the term, like sew it. So is this the term, or is this a table of the terms?
This is kind of like our table name.
The table name.
So we could call this Glossary terms if we want.
Sure.
If that makes sense.
So inside glossary terms, you'll have a glossary, you'll have the term itself, the definition of the term, where we found it. Those things go in this table. Is that the idea?
Exactly. Well, and I probably shouldn't have called this a table. This is more like an entity. This is like, okay, in regular database world, you would create a table called glossary terms, and then you would populate it with data, right? Well, this is more like, it's more like not really the table. It's more like the schema for the table, if you will. So we're going to define what columns are in there, which are fields, of that. So notice I didn't put a space in there. That will save a bit of headache later on if you do that. So no spaces on content type names. And then we could give it a description here. So this is our, and I can't get my capital G to work. Okay, glossary of terms. All right. And then you can scope this to particular things. We're not going to deal with this feature right now. We don't need that.
Sure.
So all we need now is just a name and description if we want. So we'll save that. So now we have a content type called glossary terms. Yay, we're doing good. Now, let me give you the lay of the land on this view here. So these are your content types here. They all have IDs with them. And this column items is items that are content items that go into that content type. So think of this as kind of your database at this point, but this is going to be where your rows are, your rows of data. It's going to be items. But we can't just start adding items here now because we have no fields to put the data in. So we have no columns kind of for our tables. So let's go ahead and create some fields that are associated with this. We'll go over some of these other ones later on. All right, so if I go in here, now we've got a new window that pops up and it's empty. So we need to notice this says content type fields. So that's good. We can look at that. Let's click the plus sign. Now we're going to see where we can add a bunch of fields all at once in one fell swoop. We have name of the field. We have the type, the data type of it. And then we also have what we want the input to be for that. And we'll see different things here. So let's start with the basics here. And oh my goodness, my autofill's trying to come on here for this stuff. Okay. So the first thing that we need is we need a name for the term, or what would we call that? A name, or we call it the term? The term. Okay. All right. So this is the term. All right. And yep, that's going to be a string. And I think our input type does need to be a text box, here. So that's what that's going to be. All right. What else do we have? We have got we know we have a description for it. Is that a good enough name for that for you?
Let's think about that for just a minute. You were talking earlier about conditionally showing a part of this area, the description. Another way of doing it is to have two different descriptions. One is the short version and one is the long version. So what would you recommend in our need? Because that would dictate what this is.
That's a good point. So on your list view, you're going to have a shorter version of the longer description. So I think I would separate that into two fields here.
Okay.
And so with that, in that case, let's call this one short description. And notice I'm not putting any spaces in that.
Right.
I can put a space in that, but it will cause us a little bit of trouble later on. I'll show you kind of what we're talking about later with that. And let's call this one description. You want to call it description or long description?
Long description.
Okay, we'll call that long description. And both of those are strings, but this one here, we might want it to be a rich text editor.
Yes.
Okay.
That makes sense.
So over here in our input type, we've got a WYSIWYG. Now this is the DNN standard WYSIWYG, which would be CK editor in this version of DNN. But we also have Tiny MCE, which is what I recommend, and that's what's built into Too Sexy here.
Oh, okay.
So let's do that. Let's do Tiny MCE, and that will take care of that. And just so you can kind of see what kind of data types we can do in here, we've got Booleans, we've got custom stuff, we've got date and times, we've got empty spaces, which is used really great for titles and forms on that. We've got entities, which we'll get into in just a minute on that. We've got links, which could be a link for an image. It could be for a file, that we're referencing on the page. And then we've got number and text string. So not too many to choose from there, but enough.
Right. Good.
All right. So we know at some point we're going to relate.
The short description could possibly be like that one that we have on the first one. Should that also be the Tiny MCE?
I would not on that, just because you're not going to do anything rich in that. It's just going to be text, right?
Yeah, probably. Is several lines of text be okay?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely, yeah.
All right.
Now we can do this if you want it to be a multi-line. Well, actually, I think this supports multi-line. So yeah, we're good there. Yeah, default single or multi-line string input. Yeah, we can do that.
Okay.
Okay, and the other thing that I remember seeing was image.
Yes. That
could be associated with it. Let's see. Sometimes we're going to have a read more, right? So let's talk about how we want that to actually work. Do you want to have complete control over where that links to? Or do you want that to be just all automagic? So we've got a list and detail of that particular item, and it just automatically happens.
That's a good point, because what we have to concern ourselves with at this place is who is going to be using the entry field to create a new entry. And that's going to be my wife, who is a little technical, but not very technical. So we don't want to have to have her jump through hoops for every entry. So if we can do something that's automagic, I would say probably make it automagic.
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking automagic is the way to do it, because every list item, or every item in the list, right, or every term in the list is going to have an ID associated with it. So we can leverage that ID to pull up the detail view, so we can send that over to a view that reads that ID and says, only show me the data associated with this item. So
exactly.
I think
and if
that
you're going to click the read more button, it's going to go to the detail, basically a page that's going to show me the term and the long description.
Yeah.
So it's going to be associated with this record always anyway.
Absolutely. And it's going to be leveraging this exact data too. So, it's not, you don't have to do something different for lists than you do for the items themselves. So
right. And that brings up another interesting question. Do we implicitly or explicitly deal with this idea of possibly having read more? So in the case of putting a lot of extra intelligence in, maybe it's already built into Too Sexy. If there's something written in the long description, then automatically put a read more. If the long description is empty, then don't bother. And that way she could just write the simple one-liner definition in the short description and move on. And rather than having to set another field that says you need to, I want to turn on the read more.
Absolutely. I think that doing that programmatically is probably going to be the best thing to do. on that. That way, if there's no data that is in the long description, it doesn't show the read more button. And if there is data in there, it will show it and link it to that detail page.
That's awesome. Okay.
Yeah, works great. Okay, so now I think we're probably good for now. We can come back to this a bit later. We'll be tweaking this throughout the process, but this gets the basics on there. I mean, actually, is there anything that we're missing here?
Well, ultimately, but I think it's smart to stop because I'm kind of guessing ahead. But the reference, where did you find this term in what book or books? So maybe we got to deal with that book entity thing before we come back here and define it in this table.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm skipping that one on purpose, and you'll see why in a minute.
Okay.
But one thing I did think of while you were talking there is I didn't set the input type for the image.
For an image.
So that needs to be a nice file upload kind of thing. And I'm trying to find where that is in here. Let's see. I think it's URL path or path part is what you use there. Yep.
Got it. And what about the possibility of linking one of these to another one of these? In the case of
and I did that wrong. I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but I did that wrong. We had the wrong data type in here.
Oh, is that?
We had string in here, so that's why I wasn't seeing what I was looking for over here. It needs to be a hyperlink, right? You'll use that for a link or file reference for the image, and then that gives you the ability to either it be a library of files that are on the server or for it to be the default kind of experience. And in this case, we want the default experience. So back to your question. I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
In the case of a definition relating to another definition, in dictionaries, you'll see a word and it'll say see and then another word.
Yep. Okay. So there's several ways that I'm thinking about doing that. I think that ultimately you're going to want to look at these terms in alphabetical order and be able to click, okay, I want to see all the terms where it starts with the letter Z, or L. That is going to require anchor names, on the page, so we can use the anchor tag in HTML and reference the name. But I think the name ultimately is going to be the term with no spaces in it. So I think that's going to make it unique enough. So I think we can leverage that is what my point is. If you associate another term with that term, then we could utilize that data from that to go to the anchor tag. Now, how we associate those two together, we have not crossed that bridge just yet, and we'll come to that later in the process.
Okay.
We'll get the basic structure here, and I think this is probably it for it for now, with the caveats. So we know we got a couple of more relational kind of items to work through. So let's save this, and that should add all 4 of those fields to this content type. And we may have gone so long that DNN is snoozing on us. Okay, there it goes. All right.
Okay.
So yeah, now we've got all of these. Now you'll notice over on the left we've got a title. So the term, the very first field type that you create for a content type, or a field that you create for a content type, is going to automatically be the title. And you'll see where that is used later on. But if you ever need to change the title of it, then you would just click a different star here to use that field as the title. In this case, I think you really will want to use term as the title. So every item that gets added to a content type, or we call that a content item. So you got content items get added to content types. Those content items have a label associated with them, and that's what it means by the title. So you can easily reference whatever value you put in for term. That'll be its label, so that when you're reordering things in a list or trying to add a content item that's already kind of in the data structure, kind of adding it to your list manually, you'd be able to reference it by that title that is in there.
Okay.
So that's what that's used for. So I think we're good on this right here. And oops, I clicked plus. I did not mean to click plus, so I'm going to click escape here. And I think the control here is behind. Yep, there we go. There's an X over here, and that's kind of how you get out there. But you can also use the escape key with this as well to get out of these little modal pop-ups. So I'm going to use escape. And then now we're back here, and notice that our fields show 4. And that's how we would edit the fields. So that's good for our data structure for glossary terms. This is how you edit some metadata that's associated with a content type. This is, you can export just this content type, and you can import a content type from somewhere else. So like if you have a different site and you're like, oh yeah, I need glossary terms. I need that content type on this site over here. Well, you could export this and then on the other site, import it, and it would pull right into here. Permissions are more advanced. We won't really be using that right now. And then of course you can delete a content type. So that's pretty much it on that. So we've got our glossary terms. I think we need to probably add a content type for a book. So let's go in here and do that. Now, we'll just put book in there and create this. We haven't really talked about what data is going to be associated with a book, but I'm assuming we need some similar type information here. But what fields would you see? Maybe a title?
The book title, yeah. And right now that's all I can think of for the book.
Okay. That's probably going to be a string and just a text box input, right?
Exactly. Should be fine.
So we'll leave it at that for right now. And we'll save that. I'm going to click escape or hit escape. Now we're back to here. So now that we have both of those content types, we can kind of relate those to each other. All right. So this is where some magic starts to happen, and we'll go into edit fields for the glossary terms, and let's add another field, and we'll relate these two together, and we'll call this books. And notice that one of our data types here is entity, other content items, right?
Got it.
So we can do this, and then now we can either pick it or we can do a query-based type items here, but we're going to leave this as the default here, and we'll see how that kind of works. And I'll save it. So now we just related those two things together that way.
Okay.
All right. And I think that's it, Don. I mean, that's really the starting point for this. I could show you real quick without looking at the views and anything like that. You know, you might say, well, how do I add items? Well, you can actually click the plus here and add an item to this. So this will be the same kind of interface that the user would get, you know, your wife, when she's entering these glossary terms, she'll be able to see this, but she won't be experiencing it from this techie administrative view here. We'll lock things down for her particular user role so that she doesn't get overwhelmed with all this crazy tech stuff, right? So if we were to click plus here, we'll see a modal that pops up, and this is great. Term, short description, long description, image, and whatever book is associated with it. And
fantastic.
Isn't that great? So we could put one in here. What was that one that you showed us in the last segment? Sew it or something like that?
No, that's a glossary term, right?
Okay. And then there might be some, well, maybe we should use one that's got a little bit of everything in it. Wonder if I should just open up another window. We'll do Agatha.
I can give you a definition.
Hey, copy paste works great. Oh yeah, actually no, that's not really. Well, yeah, this will be a placeholder, so let's just use this. All right, we'll just unless
go ahead.
Unless you want to give me one, that's fine too. Okay,
go ahead.
I'll paste that in there. Let's get our short description here. All right, and we'll paste that into here. And notice that, this may be an interesting area where you might want to use a different field. I don't know. It depends on how long it gets, right? It's not changing its height there. So
Right.
now when you click in the long description, since this was the WYSIWYG, for the tiny MCE editor, it's going to actually take you to another screen. You'll see this as soon as I click it. It goes to a full view, but you've got a little editor here
Sure.
for that. This editor is pretty powerful. It gives you the simple view first so that you don't find yourself getting in trouble too much. But you can click this little hat over here, I guess is a graduation cap or something, to go into advanced mode, and that gives you a bit more functionality, a little bit more what you would expect for these.
Sure.
And then you can also, these are more items that just wouldn't fit in my particular view here, but this icon here, which you probably saw in the last one, you can actually switch into source code view and do it in HTML. So you can really do some powerful stuff in here. But
Right.
unless you're just trying to put a quick hack in place, you're probably not going to be doing this that much. So
Right.
you'll just be working off of simple mode here. All right.
Right.
So here we can put a longer description in place.
Good.
Let's say it's multi-paragraph. You can put images and stuff in here as well, and it works just great. But this is really just your big content area, I guess, for this.
Right.
All right, and we could do some formatting and so forth in here. We'll just put bold on each of these descriptions and go there. All right. Now,
Okay.
when we're done with this, we'll click the back, and it'll take us right back to here. All right.
Got it.
So here is the image upload thing. We can actually upload an image here by just dragging and dropping it onto this and do it that way. That's going to be the easiest user experience, probably for your wife on that. So if I were to pull up a Finder window here, let me see if I can find some pictures over here on another screen. I do not have any pictures. Didn't think about this. Let's see here. Photos, sample album. Let's see. Yeah, I've got a few little sample images here. I'll pull it over into the screen if I can get it over here. All right, so I'm on a Mac here right now, so I've got a few little sample images here. So I could just take, and there's the Boston. So we'll just use a little frog here. So I'll just drag it and drop it right on there. And it'll take just a second, and then it shows up.
Perfect.
Now, one little hidden gem here is that you may say, well, what do I do like here? I can click this, and it'll open up the image in a new tab. Or I could click this. This is kind of cool because this is where it gets you to a little bit more features here. So if you view it in the full mode, then you can actually get access to other features here. So the quick upload is the drag and drop kind of feature there, but you can also upload a file with Atom, and here you can see multiple files. So if you have files already sitting out there, you could select those files. And I don't know why that preview is not working. It might be because this one hasn't been saved yet, but typically you'd see a preview here, and you could just select any of those or edit the names of them or open them in a new tab or delete them. So it's kind of like a little file manager or an asset manager there that you can use for that. And then we don't have any books out there right now, so we can't select the books. But later on, I'll show you where this will become a multi-select kind of combo box, if you will, where you could select 3 books if it's associated with this and so forth.
Okay, good.
But we can click Save, and now we've got one content item that is associated with glossary terms, right?
Oh, I see. All right.
Now, if we were to add a book real quick, what's the name of a Agatha Christie book here?
Murder on the Orient Express.
Murder on the Orient Express. And we'll click Save. Now we've got that item, but if we go back into our content items on this one, I meant to click the, I think it's if I click this. Is that where it is? No, I always get confused on this part. I think it's, no, that's adding an item. Oh, there's a way to get to the actual items. That's the fields. That's adding an item. How do I get to the items? Is it there? No, that's copying that to the clipboard. Is it that? No. Interesting. Okay, I thought I could get to the items there. Oh, it's here. I can probably click on this and get to it. No. Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
There's an item. Okay.
It's an item.
So now I forgot we called that glossary term 1. Okay. So now that we added the book, there it is. Murder on the Orient Express. We can relate that to that.
Okay.
So now it's related.
Well, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, so I was doing that right before. I forgot we just called that item there. So you click on the name of the content type to get to the items that are associated with it.
Got it.
All right. So that's it. I mean, we've got our basic data structure in place. Do you have any questions on this? I mean, I think this is probably a good stopping point.
From here, before our next video, I can go and toss a number of terms in and a number of books in, and then we can have more substance for the next stuff, the screens and things, the views.
Yeah, I think if you wanted to seed a few items in there, it'd be good. I wouldn't go crazy on it, and I'll tell you why, because we might end up changing these fields a bit through the process. So you don't want to... Yeah, exactly. Just enough to seed it in so we can really see something when we start visualizing this data.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, this is great. I'm going to exit out of this, and we'll call this a wrap on this one. But the thing that I will mention here, just in closing, once I get out of that, remember how it was showing us this before? Because it wanted to know what kind of app to show or which app to show. Well, now you'll see that down here pops up all of our apps that we have.
Okay.
This one is I would call this a no-no button, just because it'll install all of their apps that they have available for free, which is great as a learning tool. But if you're building a site, kind of keeping things clean and only having the apps that you're using is a good idea. So I would just click glossary, and now we've got no views showing up. So you have 2 pieces of information that get associated with an app instance. The app itself, which is the content type, and then you've got your view, which we haven't created yet. We'll do that in the next video. Thanks for joining us. And Don, this is fun, man. It's really fun.
I'll tell you.
We'll see you on the next